Welcome once again to the Petroleum and Geosystems Engineering FabFems Friday. I'm Sarah Dolby. I'm a student employee with the Women in Engineering program. I'll just be helping facilitate the panel today. I also have Jane here to help with the Q&A. She's also a student employee and she'll be around later to help with the Q&A. So today, the FabFems is a national database where you can find women in STEM role models for young women. You can search by zip code, the field of work, ethnicity, type of engineering, lots of different things you can sort by. Today, we have professionals and students from Petroleum and Geosystems Engineering. We're gonna have them introduce themselves in just a minute. And then after introductions, we'll have a facilitated panel. We already selected some questions that we'll have. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A, and those questions will come from y'all.
Hello, everyone. Jackie Hardy. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I live in Austin, Texas. I went to UT and I got a degree in civil engineering. Then later went on and got an MBA at Texas State University. I worked for 27 years with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and did environmental work like the storage tank program. And I'll probably be talking more about that later. But I was in lots of different divisions and got to work with all kinds of different program areas. But now I'm retired and I'm a full-time hobbyist, as it turns out. But one of the things I've been doing, I've been mentoring math students, 8th grade math students, to help them pass the STAR exams. And I'm in an organization called the American Association of University Women, which works with STEM groups to help encourage girls and women to go into professions like engineering, science, and math. So that's kind of how I spend a lot of my time now.
Awesome. Maggie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Maggie Gehring. I am a current incoming third-year petroleum engineering undergraduate at UT Austin. I am originally from Katy, Texas. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And one hobby that I have started to develop this past summer is I have been trying to go to the gym every 3 to 4 days a week because, you know, after that pandemic, we might have gained a little bit of weight from not going out as much. So that's something I've been doing, and I encourage you all to do it as well.
Awesome. And then Alana, if you can finish us off.
All right, hi guys, I'm Alana. She, her, hers. I graduated from UT with a bachelor's of petroleum engineering, and I'm currently working at Chevron. I'm a field engineer, specifically drilling engineer. So I'm actually on the rig right now. So sorry if I ever cut out. Service is a little spotty in the middle of the ocean. But yeah, I've been doing this for a year now, rotating 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And I'm looking forward to getting to speak with y'all today.
Awesome. All right, so now we're going to get into our pre-selected questions. The first one is for Alana and Jackie. What made you decide to pursue petroleum engineering? And can you share a bit about what you do or did in the field? Maybe a project that you worked on that you loved, and what was your role in the project, and how did you communicate with other engineers and stuff like that? Whoever wants to go first.
Lana, why don't you go ahead?
All right. So I kind of picked petroleum engineering. I wasn't really sure, honestly, when I came to UT what exactly I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do engineering, and I picked petroleum really just because I knew a little bit about it, being from Houston and everything. And I kind of just decided to give it a shot. And I took, I think it's like our intro to petroleum engineering class, our freshman year, and I loved it. And we used the drilling simulators. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm gonna be a drilling engineer one day. And it worked out. That's where I ended up. But yeah, I really, really enjoy my job. I do a lot of, I do a lot of things like between exploration and major capital project wells. I do a lot on, since I'm actually in the field, I do a lot of the like on the fly decisions. a lot of like writing procedures and stuff like that. So I really enjoy the projects that we do out here. These wells are really challenging in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think that it's really helped me to grow as an engineer and given me a lot of really exciting challenges. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, and like I said before, my degree is actually civil engineering. And I was introduced to engineering. It was a husband of a friend of mine who was an engineering student at UT, and he showed me what he was working on, and I decided that was really cool. That's what I wanted to do. So when I was still in high school at that point, right? So when I started school, I went straight into engineering and just stayed in the same field the whole time and was able to graduate and get a job right away. I was also in the co-op program, which gave me a leg up in lots of ways. So that after I graduated, I was actually a year ahead of the other engineers that were hired at the same time because of that experience in the co-op program. But I started off in water resources and got to do lots of modeling, including like working the reservoirs on the Rio Grande River that we share with Mexico. Later, I went into the storage tank program. I would go visit sites where they were installing new storage tanks, for example. And then later I was in the hazardous waste programs. So I would go to the large chemical companies down along the coast, as well as the refineries. So I was there more in like an inspector role, I guess you would say, but got to work with, companies large and small throughout the state.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, Jackie, you did say you were civil, but we'll get
That's
into
all
your
right.
journey of how you went from in that journey. Okay, our next question is from Maggie. What made you decide to pursue petroleum engineering? And can you share a bit about any projects or work experience you've had in school, and then what you hope to do after you graduate?
Yeah, so I come from a family of engineers. Both my parents are engineers, and I had enjoyed math and science during K through 12. I knew I wanted to do something in engineering, but like Alana, I wasn't exactly sure what to do. And so when I applied to UT Austin, I actually ended up getting recruited to the petroleum engineering program. I got offered a spot there. And what I was able to do is I got to sit down with the department for around 5 hours and really learn what petroleum engineering was, because I had no idea that that major even existed in the first place. And what I really took away from it is that I knew I wanted to make an impact in the world. I mean, our statement is what starts here changes the world. And some of you might be familiar with the ongoing energy transition, and the really big need for petroleum engineers is still heavily important as we enter this transition. So I saw myself being able to not only have a direction in where I was going in for my career, but I also knew I was going to make a major impact that would affect the entire world. And so over the past 2 years, I've actually currently been interning with ConocoPhillips, which is an exploration and production company, this past summer. And I have gotten the ability to start targeting greenhouse gas emissions and looking into reducing them while improving our production and our exploration. So I would love to continue to go into that into the future and continue to really optimize our oil and gas industry, because it's still going to be heavily present for the next 50 years, while also maintaining climate change and decreasing our emissions.
Awesome. Let's see. The next question is for Alana. So you work for a large energy company with lots of different kinds of engineers. Can you talk a little bit about other types of work that a petroleum engineer might do within your company, and also how you interact with other engineers or scientists across the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So even just within Chevron, even within Wells, which is drilling and completions here at Chevron, And here offshore, I interact with so many different people on a daily basis between, petrophysicists, geologists, all sorts of different disciplines are out here on the rig. And then even within a large energy company like Chevron, you might have petroleum engineers going into the drilling completion side or maybe the reservoir side. And even I have some friends that graduated with me from UT Petroleum Engineering that actually went into data science with Chevron. So that's something that I do really like about being at a large company like Chevron is there's so many different opportunities than beyond just, what you learn in your classes. And I think that they really encourage you to explore those whenever you're, looking at your career development and everything like that. And that's something that you can find at all sorts of different companies. You don't have to tie yourself down to, oh, I'm going to be in drilling and completions forever. I'm going to be in reservoir forever, whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think it's really good to, find a company that really lets you explore the different ways you want to go with your career. And there's so many different opportunities beyond just petroleum engineering.
Awesome. Let's see. Next is for Jackie. So you worked for a government agency, the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you did there, and then the work that other engineers did in that agency, and then how you interacted with other scientists and engineers in that organization?
Sure. Like I said, I was in different programs over the extent of my career. I started off in water resources, and so it was a lot of hydraulics and hydrology. The first year, you basically worked with like a mentor, a more senior person, until you kind of got a feel for the programs and what have you. But I quickly, though, got to the point where I was modeling reservoir systems. I was modeling river flow systems, and part of my role was to testify in hearings about how that would impact the rest of the system in the state. Then they started the storage tank, the underground storage tank program, the EPA did. So I started working with EPA on that program and actually wrote the rules for the program. And those rules are still in place. They've changed a little bit, but I was actually one of the principal rule writers for the program and worked with major oil companies, chemical companies, got involved with all aspects, both the planning for the facilities, the monitoring the systems to make sure they're intact, and then dealing with the releases afterwards. Then I went into the Superfund program, Superfund and hazardous waste programs. And that's when I got to start working with not just the geologists and engineers in the previous programs, but with toxicologists and attorneys. And it was great because working with these people, you got to learn so much. So I always felt like my body of knowledge was growing, and I got to learn all kinds of different things, especially since my chemistry background from UT was, besides water treatment, I didn't have a lot of chemistry. Well, I learned a lot of chemistry working in the hazardous waste programs. And so it was constant learning, and that worked for me nicely.
Yeah, that's really cool that you got to do a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Both of you got to and get to explore different parts of your major. Let's see, our last facilitated question is from Maggie. And then make sure y'all are putting your questions in the Q&A section so that we can ask those after this last question. So for Maggie, can you share a little bit about your student experience in PGE? And then can you talk a little bit about the Women in Petroleum and Geosystems Engineering, the student org?
So our department is actually one of the smaller engineering departments. My incoming class was roughly 100 students. And for me, this was a great opportunity because a lot of the faculty know me by name. They know what I'm involved in and they know my goals. The first year students, they get to go on a fall retreat that we take them on, and we give them networking opportunities with company representatives. So opportunity wise, there are so many benefits to being in the PGE department just purely because we're just smaller and our department works really hard to make sure we have opportunities. I mean, for instance, this summer, I've been getting emails almost every week with new internship opportunities for our students. The Society of Petroleum Engineers student chapter that I'm a part of, we're sending students to Dubai this coming fall for the annual technical conference and exhibition by SPE. So opportunities have been amazing. And just as a general engineering student, I've had so much help by going to the faculty and the teaching assistants or TAs. Some might be a little bit daunted with going into your first engineering classes, but I think one of the best advices I ever heard is that the goal is not to make you fail a class. The goal is to make you struggle and then see how you react. Because at the end of the day, engineering is all about problem solving and solutions. So for new students that are coming in, really, your main goal is to see how are you going to problem solve? Because like in my internship, for instance, it's not like I could go to my TA and ask them for a solution. I had to figure it out myself, right? So just getting those experience in class that end up preparing me for my internship and going into the job force have been really beneficial. And then finally, the Women in Engineering program has disciplines and student organizations for every single major. And so again, because we're a small group initially, our Women in Petroleum Engineering group is even smaller. And because of that, we're so close together. We all have a great group chat together. We've had some great socials this past year. We all made candles, for instance, in our apartment at one point, which was a bit interesting. But we all know each other, and it's almost like a sisterhood at this point. And so I would say just get involved in anything you want to while you're here if you're an incoming student, and that you have so many opportunities here.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for answering those first few questions. Now we're going to hand it off to Jane, who will facilitate our Q&A.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all of the panelists for your very interesting answers. We have quite a few questions coming in, so lots of things to learn about. The first one is for Maggie and Alana, and it is, what is a project that you would like to work on in the future? And either of you can start.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So being on this field side of things, I would love to eventually transition into the office and become like a planning engineer and do the design side of things. So something I'm really looking forward to is eventually getting to where I'm planning a well from start to finish. Because right now on this rotational schedule, you know, I'm seeing bits and pieces, good chunks at a time, but really being able to see a well through from start to finish, I know is going to be very gratifying. So that's mainly what I'm looking forward to in my career.
For me, I'm actually the opposite. So I'm working in the office currently, and I would love for the future to go into the field, maybe even a remote location like offshore, or I know we have some assets in Alaska and ConocoPhillips, for instance. I'm personally looking into going into production engineering or drilling engineering because I really am interested in the unconventional sides of oil and gas, which is meaning it's more difficult to get oil out of the ground. And there's a lot of engineering challenges associated with that. So coming into my last few years, I'm really looking forward to tackling those problems. For me personally, in my college career, I'm planning on taking carbon sequestration and capture, which is a technical elective you can take your senior year. So I'm currently planning on looking in a bit more of the emission side, but still planning on staying on the oil and gas side with production, drilling, reservoir, and all of that.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question, again, for anybody, is what is the hardest college class you had to end up taking for PGE? You can describe that class a bit, or even if you can't remember the hardest one, I think just give a sense of what the degree plan is actually like. That would be helpful. And anyone can go ahead.
I guess I'll start since I'm in the degree plan currently. The hardest class I've taken so far, it is called Transport Phenomena in Geosystems. It is very difficult because it is very conceptual. It is very heavily math theory based. It is pretty much how things move underground, such as heat, molecules, and all of that. It's very challenging, but I had a great professor. Managed to survive, as you can see. But I do love a good challenge, and you really get to understand the fundamentals of really how things work and then apply that knowledge to going into the field.
Transport, yeah. Transport is tough. It's good though. The professor's great. But yeah, for me, I would say I struggled much more in my classes outside of petroleum engineering than I ever did in my petroleum engineering classes. So like for me, I struggled a lot with like statics and solids, just because I think mostly because I was really invested in my petroleum engineering classes. I like really enjoyed them. And I really grasped them better. And so this is just like my shout out to everybody that like, it's okay. Everybody struggles through those intro classes. They can be really, really difficult and give you a lot of, doubt of, can I handle this degree? Yes, you absolutely can. You're going to struggle with some things, and it doesn't mean that you're, not good enough as an engineer or anything. I made it through, and it didn't have any bearing on how I did in my petroleum engineering specific classes. But I will say that was really tough in my sophomore year, making that kind of transition into those classes. So yeah, don't be put down by those. They can be really difficult, and you got this.
I agree. I thought the sophomore year and the engineering mechanic courses were the most difficult. In particular, dynamics. I still shiver when I think dynamics. But yeah, just stick it out, learn what you can, and you'll find that once you get to your third and subsequent years, it's topics that are much more interest to you and much more applicable to what your job is going to be like. So yeah, it was engineering mechanics for me too.
Okay, those are true words of wisdom. I'm in a different major, but I couldn't agree more. That like first, second year is pretty difficult, but you get through it. Also, as all of our summer campers know, failure is just an integral part of the engineering process. You're going to run into things and you're going to fail. You just iterate it again and again. So keep trying. Excellent words of wisdom and advice. Thank you, everybody. I'll go to our next question. This one is for Alana. It is it difficult to be in the ocean, far away from your family? How do you manage to balance your work without feeling far from home? And also, I'm just adding this in because I'm interested. What is an average day like out in the middle of the ocean? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, for sure. So to start off, I'll say yes, it's really difficult, especially at first when I started rotating. It was not an easy transition to leave and be gone for that period of time, and then you come back and obviously things change while you're gone. So at first that was pretty difficult for me, and then by the time I got into like the second hitch and you see how awesome it is to have 3 weeks off, like you kind of figure out a way to balance like your home life. So I'll call home every couple days, or we do have service, so I'm able to text my friends and still kind of feel included. But another thing is just like becoming friends and like developing relationships out here on the rig. I am very close with the people that I work with out here, and that happens pretty naturally, when you spend so much time with people. And so you don't really feel as homesick when you have like a good, strong group of friends. So I feel like that happens very naturally for people out here. And yeah, I love it. I like the schedule, and I really enjoy all the different types of people that I get to meet out here. So that's all great. It's great. And then for your question about what does my day look like? So we technically work like 12-hour days. I usually come up around 4 to do a couple things in the morning. I have a few deliverables that I do every morning. And then really it's all dictated by the well. Sometimes our days are slower, especially for drilling, which is funny because I'm a drilling engineer, but that seems to be like the more relaxed time, when we're just drilling ahead. And then when things go wrong, or when we have, a special contingency operation, there could be some long nights and some, stressful days, but you get to see some really, really interesting stuff all the time, especially in wells like in the Gulf of Mexico that have really specific and different challenges. Almost every day is different. And that was a huge draw for me. Is like, I really like things that challenge me and keep me on my toes. And that's really the case out here. So I might, spend half the day just working on something, or I might be on the rig floor with the drill crew, kind of seeing what's going on. And we have time, we play cornhole out here too sometimes when we have an hour off or whatever. So it's hard work, of course, but there's such a great relationship out here, and the work is so interesting that I really just enjoy what I get to do out here.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining all of that. Our next question is for Jackie, and it's about how your civil engineering degree translated into what you did with TCEQ. And I don't know, working with so many like different fields and disciplines of people. How did your civil engineering degree help you?
Okay, well, it kind of laid a foundation for kind of what we worked on, because how to, like, modeling. So I did modeling both in school and when I was a co-op student. That was, I worked for consulting firms and they had me modeling, I guess it was reservoirs and piping systems. And that's one of the things I kicked off and did, and became a leader in it very quickly once I got into the TCEQ. The TCEQ, of course, we were more of a regulatory agency, right? So our job was to look at the work and approve work done by engineers out in the field. And so we got to work with all kinds of, or at least be aware of all kinds of different types of systems, production lines and what have you. I didn't have to actually design a beam or design a bridge because I wasn't in the highway department, but my hydraulics, my water hydrology, water treatment classes were all very practical in what I did in my career. And geotechnical, because the contamination underground, of course, interacted with the soils and the reservoirs. And so the geotechnical studies also came into play there.
Alrighty. This next question can be for anybody, and it is, what has been the most fun class or training that you've taken?
Class or training?
I guess I'll start. I really enjoyed all of my field training that I've had in my internship this summer. So interns that are in the office, they still get to go to the field. So I went to our assets in North Dakota for a week, and I got to go out to all of our facilities and our current operating wells and see all of that. This past week, actually, I went out to our Texas assets in Eagleford, and I got to see a workover rig and a frac spread. So getting those hands-on experiences for me are the most fun, because you actually get to see like what is in the classroom and then how it's applied to the real world. Now, I will say there are field trips that do happen in your engineering classes. For instance, the 301 class, they do go on a field trip, but I didn't get to go on it personally because COVID happened. So, but if you are interested in the major, there are still opportunities to go see the real world rather than just be in a classroom all day.
Well, I'll just say quickly, looking back, I mentioned it earlier before we went live here, but one of my favorite classes was ocean engineering, where we worked on the design of offshore platforms and also looked at wave propagation across the oceans. And so, I know what it's like to expect, like a tidal wave to come through. That was a fascinating class, I thought. But in terms of while working, what was a fun thing I got to do? I went to some old abandoned industrial sites in the Houston area, which were like where most of the ships were built for World War II. It's called Tex-10. It's just outside of Texas City. And that place has such a history associated with it. And it was kind of like being on a movie set because there were all these abandoned buildings and barn owls flying out of a structure when you walk into it, and piles of slag material. And I was in my little car rental driving through all these slag materials and over these bumps, and and it was like being in a playground for me. So visiting some historical sites like that was really kind of fun for me.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say that before you come offshore, you have to do it's called Hewitt training. I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard about it. It's helicopter. I honestly can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but it's helicopter escape training, basically in the case of an emergency crash or emergency landing. And I remember I was pretty nervous going into it because I was like, what am I, like, I had heard stories about it, and basically they put you into like a big simulator, like a helicopter, and they dunk you into the pool and you figure out how to like bust the window out of the side and swim out and stuff. And I honestly had so much fun that day because I was like just swimming around, the water's all warm. And I was like, this is fun. I mean, I hope I never actually crash in a real life helicopter. But no, it's really fun. Like, honestly, every time I get into the helicopter to come out, like I just have a renewed sense of appreciation for like what I get to do, because it's so different, you know, to be able to go out to a boat every 6 weeks. So I think that's one of the coolest things, and we have the best sunsets out here. I gotta say that.
Yeah, I totally believe it. Those all sound so fun. Wow. I would love more field trips in my classes for sure. All right, I have one more planned question. This one is for Maggie, because you are still in the degree program. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you take any classes that like other engineering majors might take? Is there overlap between like petroleum and mechanical or chemical or civil, anything like that?
Yeah, so this really happens in your first 2 years. I would say pretty much every engineering discipline will have to take engineering physics 1, only a few will have to take engineering physics 2. A lot of us have to take chemistry 1 and chemistry 2. I know petroleum, chemical, obviously, and civil engineering have to take it off the top of my head. Mechanical, civil, and petroleum need to take static mechanics and solid mechanics, which is similar to physics. And then, of course, sprinkled in there are your core curriculum classes, like your English, your history. So the really, at least for your first year, the only big difference I would say between the disciplines is your intro class and then maybe 1 to 2 classes on top of that. So there is a lot of overlap, and like you've heard from Jackie, for instance, if you are in one discipline, it doesn't mean you are going directly into that discipline. I mean, like Alana said, we've had petroleum engineers go into data science. I know, for instance, some engineers have gone to Capital One, for instance, because they like how engineers think. We've had people go into coding and computer science. And then we have people like me and Alana who want to go into drilling and petroleum engineering. So yes, there is overlap. And at the end of the day, the big similarity between all the disciplines is you're learning how to think like an engineer and you're learning how to solve engineering problems.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for your questions. Thanks to our panelists for answering those, and for Jane for facilitating. We have one more closing question and then we'll finish up. So this is for everyone. What is one thing that's been fantastic about your experience pursuing petroleum or whatever engineering degree? And then maybe throw in a piece of advice for new engineers.
I'll start because I have a meeting coming up after this that I got to run to. But I think one of the best things about petroleum engineering and, you know, just working in the oil field in general is the variety of people that you get to meet and the relationships that you get to develop. So, there isn't a whole lot of women, but the ways that you get supported by women and men, everybody in the field, is really fantastic. And, I think that I can really speak to the fact that I think that more people should, spend time out in the field, and that it's going to give you so many unique opportunities and experiences. And it's just been a really overwhelmingly great experience for me. So yeah, I would recommend it to anybody to spend some time in the field, anyone who's interested in petroleum engineering. And my piece of advice is, say yes to all the opportunities that you can get. So I did internships with service companies. I did it with, large cap operators, and now I'm with a super major. And I'm so grateful for the variety of different experiences I had, because they all led me to a job that I really enjoy, and they taught me what I like and what I don't like about different jobs and different things that you do in the field. So definitely just be open to any opportunity within and outside of the industry, and just look for what you really like to do, because it's a lot easier when you look forward to going to work every day. And hang in there when those tough classes come up.
Well, I'll just chime in. I think one of the things I really valued about my career was I got to work in so many different programs, like I said, and I got to work with so many aspects, all environmentally related. So there was air programs, there was water, there was hazardous waste. I was, at one point, I gave myself the moniker Queen of Landfills, because I was director of the solid waste program. So I got to climb around on large mounds of garbage, I guess. But I also worked with companies to think of ways to use their facilities after the fact. When they closed a unit, one facility turned it into a big solar field. So there was solar engineering happening there. It got to the point where you really appreciate how our environment is impacted by our everyday activities. And I saw it from that side, not as a user, but as someone looking back in trying to measure or gauge how it's affecting our lives. I will also say I reached the point where I was considered an expert in the state and would actually testify in front of the legislators and let them know how different programs would impact the state of Texas. And so I was very active in several sessions down at the Capitol, and that's something you don't get to do all the time. So that's what I did. The advice is, stick it out. It'll be some tough times, both in your education and your career, but it's so rewarding when you get to the point where you're comfortable doing what you're doing and you're good at what you're doing, and you're making a difference.
Well, I'll speak from somebody who is not yet an engineer, but hopefully in 2 more years, I will officially be an engineer. And I think the best experience that I have had so far is actually finally getting that light bulb moment and seeing that I am an engineer and I can have what it takes to be an engineer. I think a lot of engineers in the first and the second years, they do experience quite a bit of imposter syndrome, because you are surrounded by a lot of brilliant people and you are challenged. And I remember I was sitting in my office, it was my second week of my internship, and I was trying to solve a problem that I was working on, and I was writing on my whiteboard, and I stopped and I paused and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like my mom, because this is what I saw her doing when I would go to her office when I was really small. And just having that moment and saying, hey, I can do this. I do have what it takes. And I have been able to overcome all the problems I've had been. So my biggest advice for students is just to not be afraid. I think a lot of, especially first year students, are really nervous and saying, oh, I shouldn't attend the career fair because I'm only a first year. I shouldn't go and ask that question because what if everybody thinks I'm stupid? Or just even being afraid to ask the professors for a research opportunity. You'll never get those opportunities if you never ask. And from somebody who has gone out of their way to go do those experiences, they have been some of the best experience I've had in my university career so far. And so there is no regret asking it. And even if they say no, hey, it was already a no in the first place anyways. So you're already prepared for that experience either way. So just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. It'll really benefit your career in the future. And again, your engineering days start your first day when you walk into college. It's not when you graduate. So learn as much as you can, put yourself out there as much as you can, and then finally network as much as you can.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. All that sounds really interesting, and that's great advice. I probably need some of that too. Thank you all for participating and asking questions. And